this is Dr. Anderson, and
Rob.
Rob
Yes.
Anderson, and he will say a few things about himself, and then we'll get the ball rolling with, you want to go the same?
No, we're going to go this way.
Okay, you're going to go this
Mixing
way?
it up.
Okay.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you all for being here. What a pleasure. I'd like to start by introducing my wife. My wife, Jessica, is here. She's my better half, my best friend in the back supporting me. And I had a blast in the first round, so I'm looking forward for this to even be more fun. 21 years in education, most of those based in schools. I spent 16 years as a principal, teacher, and assistant principal. I spent the past 6 years at the district office in several different roles. I served as a chief of staff, principal coach, principal supervisor, and for the past 3 years as deputy superintendent of academics. Just education is a calling for me. It's my passion, and the perspective of, or the potential to be here in Boulder Valley has me so excited I can't even tell you. What a great community, a community that supports public education, a community that is a place that I'd want to raise my family and stay here for a very long time. So I think I'll just leave it at that. Thank you for having me.
All right. So I will start the questions. My name is Heather Schwartz. I have a high schooler and almost high schooler.
Hi, Heather. Me too.
In Boulder Valley. And I'm in human resources in the
Oh,
tech
wonderful.
world,
Nice to
too.
meet you.
So, nice to meet you. Question one is, how do you see parents and families working together with the superintendent's office?
If chosen to be your next superintendent, I would hope that you would see me everywhere. Actually, I would guarantee that would happen. And in doing so, building relationships with parents and families, you have to be out in the schools, out in the community, I think, to effectively do that. I would say that we can't do this alone. This is a community effort. As superintendent, I'd really hope to be able to galvanize parents and families towards the vision and mission of our school district and work together to understand that when we're moving, we're all rowing in the same direction. And would want to be on the same page with that. I'll tell you, in my current role as deputy superintendent, I led our strategic planning efforts, and one of the big pieces that we needed to do is engage parents and families, and we did that in a very meaningful way. The end result was a plan that we could all support, and that was important in a community like ours because our community is vastly different. Fulton County is a non-contiguous district, and what that means is there's North Fulton, which is wealthy suburbs. Atlanta has 14 Fortune 500 companies. Many of the executives live in North Fulton, and South Fulton has some well-off areas, but most of our generational poverty sits in South Fulton. And we had to have a strategic plan that everybody could buy into, and you can't do that if you don't engage your parents and families, and so I do have experience in doing that. And I just think it's important, and it's the right thing to do. These are our schools. Right? These schools belong to the community, and if we're not embracing and engaging our community, then we're doing something wrong.
Hi, my name is Bob Smart. I'm a parent of 4,
Hey, Bob.
high school swim coach, and
All right.
a member of the audit and budget advisory committees.
Okay.
What about the BVSD superintendent position prompted you to apply and to even consider coming to our district? And what value and contributions do you think you can bring to our district within your first year of service?
So this is Boulder, right? So I've had a lot of people reach out to me since I've been named a finalist, and they said, "You're going where? How'd you do that?" What a great community! Again, supports public education. One of the best communities in the country, if not the world, to raise a family. I've got 2 small kids that will be students in these schools alongside your kids. I'm a big believer in that. I've always lived where I've served, and there's no greater honor than be able to serve and lead in your own community. And so I would say that those were just, it's just a great place to live, a great district, lots of options and potentials. I would say that I think that my skill set is a great fit for what this district needs at this time. I've got a lot of experience in closing achievement gaps, both as a principal and at the district level. And for all the great things that are happening in Boulder, I think that that's something that we all agree on, that we need to work on. It's how do we close achievement gaps, but while doing that, continue to raise the ceiling and the floor. Every kid deserves our best, right? We just have to accelerate the learning for our kids that are struggling. I have experience in that and have done that in several areas, and so I felt like it was a fit. But I would say the biggest value that I would bring is just a deep level of experience. Spending 16 years in schools, understanding how hard it is to be a teacher, how hard it is to be a principal, the complexities of the work, have allowed me to make great decisions as a district leader. If I didn't have that deep experience, I would have too many blind spots. I wouldn't be able to make the quality of decisions that I feel like I can make on a daily basis. It's funny, on our team, our cabinet level team, when somebody wants to know what a school's going to say, when they say something, they look to me. I just have my pulse on what it is like in schools, and so I think that deep school-based experience is a great value. And in the past 6 years, we've really focused on creating great district conditions, right? And that's what districts do. We create conditions for teachers and principals to be successful, and for students to be successful. We drive resources in the right places. We help guide and direct decisions at schools. And so I think I've done that very well over the past 6 years in my current district. This past year in Fulton County was our most successful year in recent memory. Our graduation rate leads the Metro Atlanta area. We're at 87%. Our ACT is at an all-time high, our ACT score of 23.8. We have been improving our struggling schools. 26 of our 28 struggling schools improved last year. In addition, we had more high-performing schools, A and B schools. And that's all a team effort. That wasn't just me, but I do believe that the district conditions really helped to create that success locally in schools. Because really, we all know that it's great teachers that are going to make the difference. They're the backbone of every school district. And I said this in the last room, but I'll say it again, it's that important. There is nothing more important to raising student achievement than having an effective teacher. And that's not an opinion, that's a fact. Research would tell you very clearly that having an effective teacher is the most important thing you can do. And so to have effective teachers, you have to have district conditions that create the working conditions locally that support their work.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. My name is Lisa Butler. I have 2 children in high school, and I'm a representative on the District Accountability Committee.
Wonderful.
So the question that I have is, describe how you would work with a community that is highly engaged, or some would say opinionated, about public education.
So that's where I live right now. How lucky are we to have an engaged community, people who care about kids and care about education, right? We can't take that for granted, right? And we can't take it lightly either. And yeah, parents are going to have high expectations for us, and they should, right? We have their most precious resource, their kids, and we have an obligation to give them our best each and every day. And can they question that on us? Yes, they can, and they have the right to do that. And when they do, we have to be kind, and we have to hear their concerns, and then we have to work with them to make sure that we are in tune with what it is our parent community wants. And that's what great school systems do. And as superintendent, and as deputy superintendent, I have a lot of experience in dealing with that. In my role as chief of staff, if things were complicated and weren't being worked out locally, I intervened and helped to create win-win situations. But the key, I think, to working in what I would consider, rightfully demanding communities is you better listen, right? When you don't listen, right, or if you don't listen, and if you are out of sync of your community, that's, in my experience, never ends well. Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm great.
My name's Susan Osheim. I'm in our information technology department.
Hi, Susan.
And project stuff, lots of them. And I also have a son that graduated from the district.
Wonderful.
This is a long question. So.
I'll write it down.
All right. Chromebooks are used in BVSD elementary schools, grades K to 5. The current student internet use JS policy states web and email filtering software that blocks or filters material and information that is obscene, child pornography, or otherwise harmful to minors, as defined as by the board, shall be installed in the district's data center. The very next sentence states this, the very next statement states this: students shall report access to material and information that is obscene, child pornography, harmful to minors, or otherwise in violation of this policy to the supervising staff member. Okay. What is your experience in ensuring internet safety in the classroom?
So we have in Fulton 65,000 devices. That's a lot of devices. So I have a lot of experience. A lot of experience in the sense that when things don't work, it comes to me and we have to make decisions. I don't do the work. We have a great team of people who do the work. And, ultimately, the web filters just don't pick up everything. It's tough. And then, you get to a question, and we there's a balance of, if you lock them down too hard and too much, what can the kids access? And so that is, I think, the challenge in understanding where you draw the line. I think that you have to keep kids safe. I think especially elementary school kids, I think that those things should be locked down pretty tight. Some of our high school kids have petitioned us to open up sites like Vimeo or some of these sites where they can build their videos and post their videos. The problem is that people put bad stuff on those sites. And they do it overnight, and so it's hard to catch sometimes. And so we have, I sit on our IT governance council at the district. Actually, IT information technology runs up through me as deputy superintendent, and so our CIO reports to me. We have weekly conversations. We focus very much on digital citizenship. And before any kid gets a device, they have to pass a digital citizenship. It's like a course that they watch and they sign off, and their parents sign off that they've watched that and understood that. Because I don't know that you'd ever be able to lock devices down if you're going to give them to kids where nothing's ever going to happen. I think that if you teach kids the skills to understand, this is inappropriate, here's how I need to tell, and that we can stop other kids from accessing that. And we found that actually to be the case. But I know this district has pretty significant data policies. And tightening, just the use of student data is important. It's important to us as well. We vet all of our software agreements through our attorney because you've got to. Because if you start looking at the agreements on all the software, and if you want kids to use the software, you have to kind of have a process to do that. We actually have an application review process, and so if a teacher wants to use an application, it goes through us, we go through legal, make sure the data privacy is there, and then we move forward. And so I do have experience in seeing a process that our team has built and could bring that experience to the district. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kelly Lopez, and I have a daughter who's in third grade.
Hi, Kelly, how are you?
So I am on the PTA for a Title I school on the east side of BVSD. The disparity in income levels between the east side and the west side of the county is evident in the amount of money each school's PTA has been able to raise for enrichment for our schools. This inequity is also evident in the test scores among the most wealthy versus the poorest schools in BVSD. Are you aware of this income gap within the district, and how would you work to fix the inequity in funding? And that also goes for the test scores. I quote this question.
So I answered this question in the other room. But we can't play the tape back, so I'm happy to answer it again. This is a big issue. It's a big issue in our district in Fulton. It's a big issue here. Yes, I know about it. I understand it. I drove around today, and I drove around past all of the high schools because I wanted to get a feel for the for the community, which, by the way, felt great. I also knew that before I showed up. And it's the challenges that poverty provides for our community is difficult because you have to meet the needs of all kids, right? So I grew up in poverty. I grew up in rural Florida, so I know what it feels like to be poor. And it's tough. It's tough for kids. It was tough for me growing up. I was ashamed a lot of times and just trying to not let people know that I was poor, right? And then try to learn in that type of an environment. So this is personal to me, so I understand it. I do think that when we talk about schools in poverty and Title I schools, we in our district we call these school-dependent kids. If we don't intervene and if we don't wrap our arm around these kids and give them what they need, even though their parents love them, my parents love me very much, but when I came home I was by myself. most days, right? And in a lot of ways, I had to make sure I did my own homework, and other adults from my school stepped in and held me accountable, held me to high expectation. Is why I'm here today. I think we have to do that, and we have to be sensitive to our school-dependent kids and making sure we're providing them what they need. In our district in Fulton, we've done something a little bit different with funding, and we're trying to drive resources to schools in ways that make sense to them. So what I don't think works is when you pit communities against one another, right? Or you pit groups of kids against one another. And so, if you want to get this, and I have to take that from you. I don't think that's fair for a collective community. I think that there's different ways you can find efficiencies to drive resources to where you need them. And once you find those efficiencies and get those resources, I think you do it in strategic ways. In our district, we have our higher performing schools get a little less money and more flexibility, more local autonomy. To be honest with you, for a lot of our high performing schools, the best thing as a district we can do is get out of the way. We've got great people there. We trust them. They know the problems better than we ever will at the central office. And so we give them that support. And then for our schools that are struggling, they get a little more resource, but less flexibility. We turn to the research to make those decisions, and we agree upon those. And schools are thankful for that. They're not, when you're dealing with my first teaching job was at a Title I math school in Orlando. It was the poorest, lowest performing school in Orlando, which has 200,000 students. And so it was really tough. You're so overwhelmed trying to meet the basic needs of your kids, that you need somebody to help you with supports. And so we've done that in Fulton, and we've seen great results as part of that. Did I answer your whole question? Did I answer about test scores? Because you said that specifically, and I don't feel like I did.
No, not really.
Well,
The lowest, the Title Is are the lowest.
That's right. Right, and so I think that as you drive those resources down to those schools, and you manage that tight, that inevitably, if you're doing the right things, that should hopefully impact your test scores. But I would say something we don't do in education is track that. We spend a lot of money, right? But then when it comes to looking out to our community, to our taxpayers, we can't ever articulate return on investment. As just generally, as education, I'm not saying maybe that's something that's happened here. I will commend the district. You have a strategic finance plan, which is absolutely a move in the right direction. I would say what would make that better, and strategic finance plan, for those of you who don't know, is we're going to set our instructional priorities. We're going to drive dollars there. That gets really powerful when you try to find the outcomes you're looking for, right? Here's the outcomes, here's how much we're spending, and here's our return. So I know whether to buy more, buy less, or stop spending altogether. But I've in researching this district in Colorado, the funding is an issue. It'll continue to be an issue. We have to be as efficient as we can with the money that we have to be able to drive the resources to the schools that need it. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Anna Seeger. I'm mother of two Boulder elementary school students. And my father is a math professor here at CU. I work in engineering.
Oh, wonderful.
So I'm happy to hear about your STEM background.
Yes.
Could you move the microphone?
Can you repeat the question? Thank you. So the actual question is, with a district that has a high achieving student population that is chronically masked the needs of special populations, for example, ELL students with IEP, students eligible for FRL, how would you create student-centered culture that addresses some of these inequities? Please use concrete examples of how you would approach this work.
Those are your three subgroups that are masked by the averages. And we have similar issues in Fulton. When you have situations that are this critical, that are this dire, where you have kids that are falling behind and are not catching up, I feel like those are areas where we need to work together with teachers, with principals, and come up with what we feel like research would say are the best strategies. And then we have to commit to them. And I think a lot of people do that. But where I think people fall down is then monitoring, measuring, and inspecting what they expect. Achievement gaps won't close themselves, right? And there's lots of people who are pouring their heart out to close achievement gaps, but without the right systems to monitor progress and intervene if progress isn't being made, I don't think that you can do that work. In our district, we did something, and it wasn't for a specific subgroup. We created one subgroup that we felt like would hit all of our low-performing subgroups, and we called it a bottom quartile of students. And if you were to take the students in any school and take the bottom quartile of performing students, you're going to find kids, a good chunk of that is going to be in this subgroup. And even if those aren't, if they're in the bottom quartile, we need to address that. And we wanted to make sure that these were kids that weren't falling through the cracks, right? That there's a face to a test score, and that we realized that and knew that. So we worked with our IT team, and we had this vision to create a report that looked like a baseball card. I don't know if any of you collected baseball cards as a kid, but you have the picture, then you have all the data, right? And so we created this report and gave that to schools and told them, say, listen, these are your kids that are falling through the cracks, that are in these bottom quartile. You need to make sure that they're in your interventions, that they're getting their tier 2, tier 3 interventions through RTI, MTSS, whatever it is that you're using, that they're in your after-school programs, that you're reaching out, that somebody knows that kid. And the way that schools, and then we gave them the report and kind of let schools run with it. And the way the schools used those reports was so cool. In one of our schools, they posted them up in the faculty lounge and said, put a dot next to the kid that you've got, or you've got that kid's back. And that you're going to you're going to make sure they do their homework, and you're going to help them out. And so we started to see the kids that nobody had their back. Other schools built data walls. So in any event, you have to provide schools the information in an easy way to understand. You have to be able to measure and monitor what it is that you're trying to do, and certainly work with teachers and principals to implement the research-based strategies. We have a set. I'm sure you all have a set as well, and I would want to make sure before recommending something that I'm working with the teachers here locally to understand what's working well here.
Thank you for those specific examples.
No problem.
Hello, my name is Celeste Landry, and I have 2 kids who made it through BVSD.
Congratulations.
Sorry?
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I currently teach in a central Boulder school, and I walked into my first classroom as a teacher over 30 years ago.
Thank you. Thank you.
Here's my question. On the BVSD June 30th, 2017 financial statement, there's note 9. It totals 8 pages. It states that BVSD's unfunded pension liability is $1.41 billion. How would you address this liability?
Have a bake sale? Yikes. There's no easy. That's the toughest question that I think I've seen, and I've been asked a lot of questions. I think that we just, you have to understand finances, I think, certainly to be a superintendent. I currently am very involved in the finances in our district. I lead the largest division and operate approve pretty substantial budgets. We have a $1.4 billion district budget. So that would be like not spending anything for a year for you all. I think that when it comes to these types of issues, big, challenging, daunting issues, you have to put a plan in place, and then you have to be disciplined enough to make sure that you're meeting the actions over time to get to where you want to be. I mean, you're not going to close that overnight. I don't think that there's one quick fix, but I do think that you would have to have a strategy. And I would have to know more about how you all budget, but where's the ability to scrape back funds on an annual basis? And how does that work within this district? Are we budgeting to a certain extent? Are you budgeting all of your revenues and your expenditures? Is that always are you always spending at 100%? And if you're not, what do you do with the rest? In our district, if you depending upon the amount of your budget, you spend 96, 97% of your budget. That's 3%. What do you do with that? Is there a policy around how you drive those dollars? And how do you drive those dollars to get yourself to a place where you can tackle big challenges like that? But it comes. I've been trained in a fiscally conservative district. We have a very healthy reserve. 15% is our reserve. We're AAA bond rated district. And it takes, you have to make sacrifices to get to that place. And so I understand what that takes, but it sacrifices over time where you'd have to tackle a challenge that big. Okay.
My name is Jeff Clay. My two boys
Hey, Jeff.
graduated from high school, so I don't have the kids in the district any longer, but work for the YMCA here in the county, and I also sit on the bond oversight committee.
Oh, wonderful.
The question for you is, what do you understand to be the largest opportunity for growth across BVSD in the near, medium, and long term? And how do you see yourself as providing the right leadership around this? Growth being an area of improvement. Please be specific in your answer and do not generalize.
Jeff, I got it. These are great questions. An area of, so many things are great here, right? But I'll tell you this, I do, and I said this in the other room, and I'll say it here. I believe that this district could be the best district in the country. I mean, you have a committed community. You've got that supports you with resources. You've got great teachers, great talent. You have a low teacher turnover rate. I think it's like 10%. And I'm not sure, from where I'm from, we'd take that all day long. I promise you. You know, the war for talent and teachers and keeping people in the profession is. Trust me, you get a retention issue, you're going to have, you know, the wheels start falling off. So that's important. You know, I would say that the true opportunity is that I see in the short term is to build upon the strategic plan. Talent partnerships and learning, those are really good things. I do think there's an opportunity, though, given, you know, even when you look at the qualities desired and think about the input that's been given to this superintendent search, to strengthen that plan, to embed some things in that plan that will also hold us accountable as a district. I led our strategic planning in our district, and one of the things that is different between our strategic plan and yours, which I think is something that we'd want to consider, are targets. What are the guarantees we're making to the community on what we're working for? What are we guaranteeing on third grade reading, which, by the way, is the most important target in early literacy, in my opinion, is the most important thing that a superintendent in a school district can focus on, because if you can't transition from learning to read to reading to learn, we are robbing those kids of opportunities and robbing them of their dreams if we don't teach them how to read. What do you do in fifth grade? In regards to numeracy, what are the expectations there? And so we have targets all throughout. It's almost a pathway, a portrait of a graduate, so to speak, that stops along the way. Here's where we hope kids are, and this is how many kids are meeting that target. And I think that if you added, you know, some of those ideas in working with the community, certainly working with staff, you could make what was a good strategic plan really great and really set the district up for success in the future. So I would almost say that that's near, medium, and long term. The strategic plan, I think, is just a golden opportunity to build on the energy that this search hopefully will provide for this community, and then move forward with the district. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Melanie Goss, and I am the parent to a second and fourth grade boys.
Wonderful.
I'm also a financial leader in the tech community here in Boulder. The question that I have to ask is, what will you hope to accomplish in your first 90 days on this job?
I want to meet everybody. I want to be everywhere. I'll tell you that if I'm given this opportunity, which would be a dream come true, that I would do a lot of work prior to showing up on the first day. I wouldn't be here the first day asking simple questions. I would have already done my homework. And I would spend the first 90 days building relationships, listening, understanding what's going great here in this district, and what are the problems we need to work together to solve. You know, I lead through relationships. It's just kind of how I was raised. It's my philosophy that we're in a people business, and you have to be good with people and get to know people and understand people. And visibility is important. I'd work with our Board of Education to really help guide and direct me on how to spend my time and where that needs to be. And because they're going to be able to point me in the right directions. They're the elected officials, and they're a strong team, and would look forward to the opportunity to working with them. But once I had my plan, it would be public. I'd publish my calendar on a weekly basis. You'd know where I'd been and know who I'd met with. And I believe in being very transparent. And so my wife knows. Jess, sorry. My kids know, because I've done, you know, when I was a high school principal for 8 years. a similar rhythm. When you come to a high school, you need to be at everything. I would want to be at everything in the first 90 days, and get to know this community and be there and learn all the great things and the opportunities to improve.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Wendy Fiedler, and I had two boys that graduated from Brookfield High School. And so I'm so pleased to hear that you got around Brookfield and
Yes.
to the whole entire
Yep.
district. So
It was a lot of
thank you
fun.
for making that effort.
I'll probably need to fill up before I head back to the airport, but that's all right.
So my question is actually my question. And so it's the safety and security of our students and staff must be a top priority within BVSD. Please discuss your philosophy regarding school safety and security and identify specific strategies and policies you have employed in your school, in your current school district.
So this Parkland incident really hits home close to me. So I spent 16 years of my career in Florida, and the last school I was at, my athletic director was great friends with the athletic director who jumped in front of bullets to save kids and went to the funeral. And so this is something that has been crushing, right, as we think about how something like that could happen. School safety and security will always be a top priority. You know, I would owe it to this community to make it such. I think about the day after that shooting when my own daughter looks me in the face and says, "Daddy, I don't want to go to school." Right? And my kids will be in these schools with your kids. I would have to do everything in my power to make sure that they were safe. I can tell you what we did in Fulton. First, I'll say this. I would want to commend the district for the response and some of the communication that they've put out on your website. It's very good. I've reviewed that. In our district, as soon as this happened, we pulled all our principals together, trained them on our protocols, went back and required them to train their teachers. We immediately purchased six more police officers, so no high school was ever abandoned without having an officer. We've worked on hardening the perimeter of our schools for some time. I know that you all are in the process of doing that. I think some are done, some might not be done yet, but that's critical. And then, you know, I spent 8 years as a high school principal, and unfortunately, I've taken guns off kids. You know, we've got to know our kids. And you've got to have systems in place where kids can use a tip line, and that's not considered snitching or tattling. That you really work with our entire community to make sure that people understand and know that. And then you also, I think, have to have a strong supervision plan, and then don't get lulled into a false sense of security, because that, I think, is the scariest thing. So you have to have a rhythm and a discipline around these types of trainings and bringing this to the forefront, and understanding that it's something that just when we stop thinking about it is when it happens, and it's scary.
Hi, I'm Jenny Belval. I'm from Brookfield also. My kids are grown.
Hi,
I
Jenny.
just term limited off the school board in December.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you for your
And,
service.
I was also born in McRae, Georgia, and I bet you don't know where that is.
No.
So,
I'm sorry, where did you say?
McRae.
No.
Very small, very small. Anyway, my question is, and I should say, and before I was on the school board, I worked in the Talented and Gifted program.
Oh, wonderful.
Which doesn't have anything to do with this question, but sort of it does. What works and doesn't work to close achievement gaps?
I've had success in closing achievement gaps, but you need to know it takes time and patience. You have to do the right things over and over again for an extended period of time to close achievement gaps. We've done that in our district around graduation rate. I'll allude to some of the points I made earlier, where you just have to have, there has to be good practice, but then a level of inspection to make sure the work is happening. And I think that that's just a critical piece. Measuring, monitoring, adjusting, and discipline over time. But when you do that, great things can happen. In Fulton, in 2012, we had a 72.1 graduation rate, and it was amongst the lower graduation rates in Metro Atlanta. And now we're the highest, and we're at almost 87%. And we did that by putting our heads together, understanding research-based strategies, driving the resources and supports to schools. Achievement gaps are going to be closed by teachers and principals in schools, right? You have to understand that and know that. And then making sure that you're monitoring and adjusting as needed. And if you do that over time and you stay the course, right, and you're patient, then I think that you can start to see the gaps begin to narrow. And if you were to put them on a line graph, year over year and results, you should see the top still moving, right? Because we have to have high expectations for all kids. It's not, here's what doesn't work. I'm going to try to close the gap by not teaching the top kids and just trying to focusing on the bottom kids, right? And try to bring the top kids down. I don't think that's a good idea. You want to raise the floor and the ceiling. So, but you need to be focused. You need to be disciplined, and you need to have the commitment and work with your teachers and principals because they're the ones who are going to get this done.